afternoon. Welcome to TNC Radio.live. This is the Truckers Network Radio Show. And now here's your host, Shelley Johnson.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. Yes, this is the Truckers Network Radio Show on TNCRadio.live, where we offer the news, information, traffic, weather, sports, and entertainment our commercial drivers want to hear. You know, many households have limited, reliable access to a sufficient quantity of affordable, nutritious food, and as food prices rise, this problem becomes even more acute. Many drivers also face the rising cost of food on the road and food insecurity. With inflation, it's a concern for everybody, and it's more common than you think, food insecurity. Dansha Johnson and his wife, Nicole Folks Johnson, are the owners of Eat Right Atlanta. They're addressing the increasing problem of food insecurity, especially with today's inflation. Nicole is with us today to discuss what they're doing and maybe educate us on what's happening on food insecurity. Welcome, Nicole. I appreciate you being on the show with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about Eat Right Atlanta, what you're doing to help people with food insecurity, and maybe educate our listeners about food insecurity.
Okay. So we started our business 12 years ago during the recession when, to be honest with you, our neighbors were hungry. And we bought boxes of food, lots of boxes of food, and decided to just share them out. Everybody kind of got the same assortment of things, but it would be enough to feed a family for a week or two. Mm-hmm. And then people started to call us, you know, they heard about it. Could they get one? And then it kind of took off on its own. It was never anything we thought we would be doing. I worked in advertising before that. My husband worked for a produce delivery company. So he knew where to get the food and he knew who to talk to and what to do. But as far as this was concerned, it wasn't anything that we had ever thought of doing. And actually, no one else was doing it. So that's kind of why people gravitated towards us. And we just started doing that. And then we delivered to a woman who worked for one of the hospitals. And she asked us if we would come to the hospital and help them, you know, because at the time, you know, people were, again, struggling with food. And this is 12 years ago. People, you know, things were costing a lot. Gas was high back then, just like it is now. Yeah. And everything was expensive. And people, at the end of the day, didn't have time and they didn't have money. So we started going to hospitals and setting up farmers markets and going to offices and setting up farmers markets just for a couple hours every day. But people could get their food. They could get fresh stuff and it didn't cost a lot because we sell everything not by weight. We sell it by the package. So you get a bag of food and we encourage people to try different things. And, you know, we tell them how to cook it and just kind of make it interesting and fun. And it stayed that way. We stayed doing the hospitals for, I guess I would say 10 years. And then when the pandemic happened, we couldn't go into hospitals anymore. And we said, well, let's make it a delivery service because at this point, everybody is locked in their houses and they can't go anywhere. So let's deliver. And the first week we had like 7,000 orders.
Wow.
Okay. So I guess we're doing that. And so we did that for 2 years. And now we're back doing the hospitals and we're doing deliveries. And now it's, you know, it feels different this time because I think people are so exhausted from the pandemic and what happened before. And now it's something else. Now it's their money. You know, now the money isn't stretching. So now what to do? So we're getting a lot of new people who, you know, before said, well, you know, I can manage. I don't have to, you know, get a bag or box of food. I can just go to the store and get what I want. And now they're realizing that their dollars aren't stretching the way that they were before. Oh, so now they have to be creative.
It's major sticker shock when you know, even big stores like Walmart and stuff. It's like, oh my goodness, this is double what it used to be.
Yes.
Scary stuff. Yeah.
I mean, I go to the grocery store and I still need things and I go in there and instead of spending $50, I'm spending $100, which means that I can't go as often. It means that the things that I would want to buy for my family, I can't necessarily buy. So, you know, we try to be creative. And then what has also happened, what I've been noticing, a lot more people are calling to say they need help that they want to get the food, but they don't have the money. And so we have a fund for people who can't afford it, and we send them food.
That's so wonderful. I want to commend you on what you're doing. This is so needed. And I don't think a lot of people really think about it. Food in our country, it seems to be so plentiful, but yet it's not getting where it needs to be. And there's so much waste. I mean, if you look at buffets and so forth at restaurants, they can't redistribute that food. It just gets thrown away.
I know. And it's really a shame. And then what gets left behind at, so when you go to supermarket, everything has a sell-by date. Yeah. And then, a lot of these things are just in the back in dumpsters for people. And I meet people who tell me that's where they go grocery shopping, which is crazy.
They go dumpster diving.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness.
Behind the supermarket.
Yeah.
So they can get their food.
When did this become such a problem? Is this over decades? You don't hear people talking about it 30, 40 years ago necessarily, or maybe there's just more awareness today.
I think it is a combination of a lot of problems. Mm-hmm. So I was listening to the news this morning, and they were talking about the drought in California, how now everybody has to, they can't water their lawns. And I think I think it's Arizona or something where they're making them take their grass up. So nobody can have stuff like that because it's too dry. And so they're conserving their water. And then at the end of the story, they were talking about farmers not being able to water their crops, which means that a lot of people won't get their food. So then you're going to have a supply and demand problem, which we already have, mm-hmm. but this is weather related supply problem. Right. And I know, I think it was 2 years ago when they had that really bad flood in Texas. Mm-hmm. And it was either 2 years ago or last year. And they said,
Tom, you would know. When was that flood in Texas? I'm not sure. Tom may be doing something. I just thought I'd ask him because our station's in Houston. So.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. So, but what we heard, because we get quite a bit from Texas because we're an all year service. So we don't just rely on produce that grows in Georgia. We get produce from Alabama, sometimes from the Midwest. We get a good amount of things from Texas and Florida, Mississippi. But because of that flood, we were told we weren't going to get anything for a year.
Oh my!
Anything coming out of that region because of the flood, it was going to be a year before we saw anything else. So I think, supply and demand is major. Mm-hmm. And then just other things which aren't really making a lot of sense to me. But, prices are just going up. And
it's absolutely nuts. And I also heard that fertilizer, the cost of that is so high that a lot of farmers are not using as much, which means they're not going to have the yield that they need to have.
Exactly. Or they're using, the really cheap stuff, which in lots of cases can be bad. They're using things that are not allowed, things that, they know cause certain conditions that they shouldn't be using on their food. But the better stuff is too expensive. So then they go for that, which means in the long run, we'll be dealing with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's it's a lot of reasons, I think, but it's all happened at once. So I think people are really feeling it.
And it's across the nation. And, I don't think a lot of people want to admit if they have food insecurity. It's a real pride thing. Mm-hmm. But when somebody can only afford maybe one meal a day, or they can only afford to feed their children and they try to fill up on water and stuff, that is a serious problem.
That is a major, major problem. And then a lot of the food banks, because people would go to food banks, and the food banks will tell you, that their supply is low too, because people aren't donating like they were before. So that's.
Yeah. And our drivers, they face some of this too. They may not talk about it, but, they're on the road and they've got a rising cost of food unless they stock up and they cook on the truck. And even so, that's an increased cost. Yes. So it's a logarithm that hopefully we can get ahead of and so people can survive and eat, especially in this country where we're supposed to be the land of plenty.
I agree.
Mm-hmm. We have to go to break here. I want to break down some more information and some stats and how people can help with the food insecurity across our nation. It's so very important. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. We're talking about food insecurity. We're going to be talking some more, so stay tuned right here on TNCRadio.live. Being on the road can make you feel free, excited, and adventurous. It can also make you feel lonely and even depressed. So it's important for truckers, especially long-haul truck drivers, to bring items on the road to keep them entertained. Truckers have 10 hours off for a 24-hour day. Depending on how long the driver sleeps, there can be several hours where the trucker has nothing to do. We've broken down the list of essential items to keep in your truck in several different categories. The second category we talk about is entertainment. Laptop or tablet. Bring a laptop or tablet and stream your favorite movies or TV shows. If you don't have access to Wi-Fi or a personal hotspot, you can still bring your laptop, some DVDs, and watch a movie. Game console. Playing games is a great way to keep yourself entertained. You can also play with your friends. Bring your Xbox or PlayStation and set up your own gaming station in the cab of your truck. Puzzles, crosswords, or cards. If gaming or watching movies don't interest you, bring some puzzles or crosswords to solve. You can also get a deck of cards and play games like Solitaire, March Same Rank, Devil's Grip, Klondike. Books. Reading books is a great way to pass time and improve brain connectivity. Some popular trucker books include The Highway by C.J. Box, Blue Highways by William Least Heat Moon, Paradise Valley by C.J. Box, Rough Way to the Highway by Kelly Mac McCoy. Exercise equipment. Truck drivers' health suffers from the lack of exercise. Bringing exercise equipment on the road will keep you entertained and improve your overall well-being. There's several portable exercise equipment items you can store in the cab of your truck. They include dumbbells, resistance bands, kettlebells, and running shoes.
Do you have the TNCRadio.live app? It's free and easy to download. Just go to app.tncradio.live, Google Play, or the App Store. Get access to live streaming radio developed by drivers for drivers. Download the TNCRadio.live app today.
Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson here with Tom Kelly and Tom Kirk. We're talking with Nicole Folks Johnson. She's one of the owners of Eat Right Atlanta. It's a food co-op that helps to stop food insecurity. Nicole, I love what you're doing. It's such a pervasive problem. It's not talked about enough in our country, food insecurity. Why is food not getting where it needs to go? Why are people not getting the food they need?
I wish I knew the answer to that. Why aren't they getting the food they need?
Did you want to chime in here, Mr. Kirk? I mean, do you have any insight? Or
I think some of it is having hauled produce and meat and things like that for a number of years, for good 14 years before I'm doing what I do now. A lot of it, though, is when you go to a lot of these stores, they expect everything to look a certain way. There's certain varieties, certain sizes, certain colorations that are desirable. So if you've got carrots that are funny shaped, well, you're not going to see them in the grocery store. So sometimes they get turned into animal feed. Sometimes they get discarded. Sometimes they may get used, at various other food plants. But that's, I think, one of the questions I have for Nicole. Have you looked into trying to get some of these seconds or blemished foods? Maybe blemished is not quite the right word, but the foods that are kind of the funny shapes, to as a way to supplement some of what you're doing.
Yes, we call them ugly fruit and vegetables, and yes, we take them. Okay. And I push them on my customers because there's nothing wrong with them. They're delicious just the same. They just, yes, your squash might have two heads. Your carrots might have 2 points. Sure. They might not look, they won't look like the picture. And that's okay.
But if you have some kids and stuff, that'd be kind of fun. You know, they can guess, what does this look like? There's a face on it, you know.
And what we really try to explain to people is produce is not perfect, and it's not supposed to be. I mean, they're not books, they're not pens, they're living and growing, and they're not going to all look the same. And if they did, you probably shouldn't eat it, because that would mean it's got way too much fertilizer, chemicals, and all sort of weird stuff in it. Mm-hmm. So we really, we try to encourage people to eat that. And yes, I take all of it. I do, because we have a lot of people to feed. We feed over 500 families a week.
Wow.
And it's really 50% of what we do is to try and help people understand food and understand how to prepare food. And yeah, it's not supposed to be perfect. It's not. So we take the kickbacks. We do.
So,
yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
Excellent. Well, I was going to say, that's excellent news, because I know there is a lot of food that unfortunately does go to waste because it isn't quote unquote perfect in some way.
Yes. I know. And I'm waiting for it always.
Mm-hmm. So the term food desert, I've heard that term, and food insecurity. What are the differences there?
Okay, so food desert, you have a lot of people who live over, I think it's 1 mile to 5 miles from a supermarket or from any place where they can go and properly shop for food. So there might be other things in the neighborhood. There'll be, fast food places, or there might be, corner store, gas stations sell things. So they have ways of getting quote unquote food. But as far as having access to fresh and healthy food and having access to some sort of a variety, and then having access to decent pricing, because a lot of the places where they don't have a supermarket, the people know that the people who live there don't have a choice. So they'll charge them whatever for something stupid, because they know that they can't go anywhere else and get it. So if I'm correct, and it's the last I checked, there were 75 food deserts in the Atlanta area alone.
Wow.
Which one would think wouldn't really be a thing, because it's a big city. And of course, I drive, so I know I can quickly get to whatever I need. But a lot of people don't drive. A lot of people take the bus, and then there are a lot of areas where there's nothing there for them to drive to. If they do need something, they have to go pretty far. So those are considered food deserts, areas where people have to go far to go and get their food. And then the further out you go, you'll see that will be 10 miles, 15 miles for some people to go grocery shopping. Mm-hmm. And most of us would not do that. But that's a reality for some people. And it wasn't always like this. A lot of these places, the supermarkets closed, the population might have dwindled, and they said, well, it's not a business. So then they move, and then people have to go far for their food. So we deliver to a lot of those areas because we know that there are people who need it. And especially during COVID, when people were, shut in, and you had a lot of people who were just ill, they can't go anywhere. They need it to come to them. And some delivery services won't go to them either because they say it's too far.
Oh, wow. So what type of food do you deliver? A wide variety?
Yes. So we have bags and boxes of food. One of our best sellers is the large family box. It's $30, and you get between 12 and 14 types of fruit and vegetables. It's mainly vegetable with a little bit of fruit, but enough so you can cook some meals, some sides, and have some fruit to grab. And it feeds 4 to 5 people. So large servings, it's enough to last a while. So that's, I would say, our best deal. Mm-hmm. And then we have another package called the Pick 10, where people select 5 types of fruit and 5 types of vegetables. That's $25. And the servings are pretty large on those as well. So let's say if you pick apples, you'll get 5 or 6 apples. That counts as 1 fruit. Same thing with oranges, that'll count as 1 fruit. Container of strawberries would count as 1 fruit. A cabbage would count as 1 vegetable. And they could say, give me the biggest one you have. We don't care because we don't weigh it. We're just about giving you as much food as we can for the most reasonable price.
That's excellent. That's a good value.
It is. It is. It is. And we know this. And for that reason, even with inflation, we've stuck with our pricing. We've had to raise the delivery fee a little bit just because of gas. Yeah. But we've stuck with the pricing and just try to get more people, because if we raise the price too much, then the food becomes unaffordable. And then we're just adding to the problem and nobody's eating what they need to eat.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't think people realize that with the rising fuel costs, the rising fertilizer costs, potential shortages in harvest this year, things could be food insecurity across the nation. Yes. Much more profound and commonplace than it is now.
Yes. And I think people are already starting to pull back because I think they're seeing it. Because each week it seems to be getting just a little worse,
And Shelley, I think one factor on here that we haven't really talked about is maybe we have too much variety in our stores. Because you go to the store sometimes and you'll see 10 varieties of apples, 3 or 4 varieties of just summer squashes, whether it's zucchini, summer squash, this variety, that variety, etc., different varieties of cauliflower, etc. And while having variety is great, the problem is the more variety you have on certain things, you get to a problem of, well, what store is going to carry what? And if all of a sudden you're carrying variety X and all the stores decide they want variety Y, that's a problem. And, the more stuff you have, it's kind of this whole scales thing. And then I think the other thing that also makes a difference too, or a factor, is a lot of these seeds are trademark, copyrighted, et cetera, because they're hybrids or genetically modified or whatever classification they are. So they're owned by certain seed companies. And in some cases, some of these farmers, they have to commit to using only seeds from company X. They can use company X's corn, company X's potatoes, company Y's this. So those are some of the other factors that impact the cost that I don't think people think about at times.
Isn't that crazy about the seeds?
Yeah.
And I remember, because I grew up a little bit on a farm, and one of the conversations that was had at times was, if you lived out in certain areas and you were growing some of the more heirlooms or traditional varieties, because they can kind of do some weird things with some of the certain hybrids. You could sometimes be sued by certain places because you were messing with the hybrid varieties. Because there was a push at one point to get everybody to use, whether it was, seed brand X or Monsanto or Y or whatever it was. There was some real serious pushes at one point in time. And with the organic movement that's going out, you do see, and the buy local farms and stuff, there is a push to go back to more of the heirloom varieties. And, heirlooms, for somebody who doesn't know, those are the stuff that if you go back hundreds of years before all the fancy crossbreeding and genetic manipulation of today, those were the more traditional seeds and the more traditional crossbreeding techniques. And a lot of times they have more flavor, but they're not necessarily as good for transporting, and they don't necessarily look as uniform.
Yep.
Very good point.
That is true.
We have to go to break here. I want to unpack some more detail on this and give people some real insight and maybe what they can do to help stop food insecurity, because it shouldn't be happening here in our country at all. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.live. We're talking with Nicole Folks Johnson. She's one of the owners of Eat Right Atlanta. Please stay tuned. We've got more great information coming up right here on TNCRadio.live.
This blog is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. Team driving with your spouse. Is it for you? Trucking's an exciting career with many opportunities. Although there are many benefits to being a truck driver, such as freedom on the open road and seeing new places, there's still negative sides like loneliness and boredom. Truck driving is also difficult for your marriage. Being away from your spouse for days or weeks at a time makes it challenging to have a happy and healthy marriage. Thankfully, truck drivers have the option to team drive with their spouse. Forming a husband and wife trucking team can be a great opportunity to spend time together and travel the United States while making good money. Now, like any other job, driving with your spouse has pros and cons. Stay with me to find out if team driving with your spouse is right for you. Now, the pros of team driving with your spouse. Faster delivery. Due to the FMCSA's hours of service regulations, truck drivers can only drive up to 11 hours a day. Any driving after 11 hours will result in a penalty and a bad safety score. Truckers on average will drive up to 55-60 miles an hour. After their 11-hour shift, that adds up to a little over 600 miles a day. When you drive with your spouse, you can drive more miles. While you're finishing your 11-hour shift, your spouse can be resting and getting ready for their shift. This allows drivers to complete more miles a day, which in return leads to a faster delivery. You won't feel lonely. Driving alone can lead to developing mental health issues later on in your trucking career. Studies show that depression and anxiety are some of the most common mental health issues in drivers today. Team driving with your spouse eliminates feeling lonely on the road. Having your spouse with you on the road gives you someone to talk to and enjoy your daily activities with. Make more money. A single truck driver makes less money per mile than one whose team drives. Why is that? Well, with two drivers, you're completing more miles each day, and therefore you reach your destination much quicker. Cons of team driving with your spouse. Difficulty getting along. They say that distance makes the heart grow fonder, and that's true. It can be difficult to get along with your spouse when you're in a small space for weeks at a time. You may find yourself wanting alone time to pursue your hobbies and interests. When you decide to team drive, you give up the possibility of any alone time in your truck. Lack of sleep. To make team driving work, your spouse will have to rest while you complete your shift of driving. Sleeping in a truck cab, especially if your spouse is noisy, can be difficult. As a truck driver, it's essential to have a good night's rest before hitting the road. Getting the right amount of sleep is not only good for your overall health, but it also makes you more alert and cautious when driving. Harder to find trucking insurance. If you decide that team driving's for you and your spouse, you might have trouble finding a commercial truck insurance company that'll write your insurance. When you team drive, your truck never stops. Therefore, the truck is at risk for higher exposure to accidents. Your truck's also more liable to having maintenance issues, which can result in getting violations. Conclusion? Driving with your spouse has many pros and cons. Our advice to you is to take a look at the pros and cons and determine if this is the right career path for you and your spouse. Trucking with your spouse can lead to many great memories. This blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
This is Alec Debogorski, and you are listening to TNCRadio.live.
Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson here with Tom Kelly and Tom Kirk, and we're talking with Nicole Folks Johnson. She and her husband, Dansha, own a co-op called Eat Right Atlanta. It's a food co-op that's helping people with food insecurity. They're doing a marvelous job, and she's educating us on the whole issue of food insecurity. Nicole, is there any way for people to maybe properly prepare and plan? Because as we were talking about the rising food costs and gas costs and all of that, it seems to be spiraling out of control. How can people help others and help themselves to eliminate the possibility of food insecurity?
Well, I know one thing that's been helping, one thing we've been encouraging our customers to do is just to cook their food. Eating out is expensive. Mm-hmm. Buying, fast food or quick and easy meals is not always the best thing for you. You have one thing we have learned while doing this business is that, cheap food, people putting cheap food in their body will end up paying the doctor later. Yep. And so it's really important that people pay attention to what they're eating. And that's been the impetus for what we are doing, because what we discovered is that people who live in food deserts and people who are food insecure usually have health conditions related to their diet. So then you see, high numbers of people who have hypertension or diabetes, mm-hmm. or, just as we saw with COVID, people who had the worst outcomes usually were in the worst shape. It was something where we're encouraging people to go back to basics. And that means that, you go home and you make your cabbage and you make your, sweet potatoes and you make a salad and you do the simple things. And we try to make it easy. We don't give people things they won't recognize. There are a lot of things that you can grow that, are good for you and delicious, but most people are not familiar with them. They know simple things like apples, oranges, lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, basic things. And so we really try to encourage people to go back to the kitchen. You will save money. It might cost you a little more time. You're spending more time, cooking your food, but it is definitely better for you. And then, meal prep, preparing your meals, planning your budget based on that. It is more work. We know this. But what they say, you can pay the farmer today or pay the doctor later.
That's true. So, are there people too that may not know how to plan meals?
Yes. Okay. We meet them every day.
Okay.
And because we're working in the hospitals, we usually meet people on the worst day of their lives. We meet them because they've just been given bad news about themselves or a family member, their child, and they're referred to us by the dietitians or nurses or nutritionists who tell them that, they need to come downstairs and talk to us. And we try to put them on some sort of a plan where they're getting food regularly, and we give them recipes and we talk to them and let them know that, it might seem intimidating at first, but you can do it. And we show them easy ways to do this. And, the internet is wonderful. The internet will, you can go on there and learn how to make anything.
Right.
So we send them that way as well. And we try to treat our customers like friends. So they can also call us up and say, I got this. I don't know what this is. I know what to do. And we'll tell them. So we are asking people to do something that they haven't done for a long time. But we really feel that it's the right way to go. And especially right now, being that things are costing so much, it is probably the smart thing to do.
Yeah, I don't even know. Is home economics even taught in school anymore?
I don't know. I have a 15-year-old in high school, and he's not taking that. I don't even think they offer it. You're right. You might be right.
Yeah, I mean, it's important. And when you think about it, back in the Depression, one of the things that home economics classes, of course, more girls went to that because they were the homemaker typically.
Right.
They were taught how to substitute. If they didn't have butter, they could do something else.
True.
Because they had shortages of food then. Those who were farmers had more food. They may not have had money, but they could eat. People in the cities were in not as good a shape in that regard. And of course, then they had the soup lines and that sort of thing. So food insecurity is not something new. But it does seem to be more in certain areas geographically. Am I correct?
Yes. Yes. And especially, cities where people work a lot and they don't have access to this. I mean, where are you going to plant a garden? You live in an apartment building. You're not.
Right.
And all that stuff has to be carted in, and they might not have it. Or if it is, it's expensive because it's got to come from a fireplace. So it's definitely in cities it's a bigger deal. Rural areas you can grow stuff, and you might know a farmer.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Or where a farm is, or how to get these things. But there's a lot of work to do.
Certainly, like with canning, 50 years ago, people had larders and they had pantries and they would can fresh fruit. And my mother did that. She was always canning peaches. Oh, I loved those. And she'd can tomatoes and this and that and the other thing. I mean, there was always, if she hadn't grown it, she'd be going to the local farmer. And then it was a major process,
I have a friend and she does all that. And I think she's so amazing because she has 8 children and she doesn't waste anything. She finds a way to cook whatever it is. And she does the thing where she cans and she makes jam and she does, she sews clothes. She does all these things that I would look at her and be like, I don't know how to do any of this.
Yeah.
But, you know, I say, if things go south in this world, I'm coming to your house because you know what to do. The rest of us don't know how to do it.
Yeah, I remember my mother saying to my sister and I that, you know, if the power went out, we would have no idea how to survive. You know,
It's true.
And she'd been, you know, she was raised in rural Minnesota, where power wasn't always in certain areas where the farms were. It wasn't always prevalent. You know, she knew what it was like to use an outhouse and all of that. You know, so, well, and of course she'd joke about it too. She said, I have no desire to go camping. I did a lot of that as a child. So, you know, but she knew how to sew and can and cook from scratch. And I don't think the family budget with food was as expensive because she knew how to do that.
Yeah. No, it costs a lot more when you have to have somebody do it for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Instead of having chicken all cut up, buy a whole chicken and cut it up.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm. But I'm as guilty as anybody else. I get packaged chicken, you know, it's convenient, that sort of thing. I know how to cook potatoes, but do I always? No, I get the, you know, Bob Evans potatoes. It's easy. It's mashed. It's ready to go. Throw it in the microwave.
No, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
And we all do that.
Yeah.
We all do that because we're trying to do everything.
Yes, we are very busy.
Yes.
Busy. I definitely want to talk more about how people can maybe help others, maybe get involved in helping your organization, or maybe even doing something locally across the country. I think these are needs. And Tom, maybe you could give some insight maybe in the next break, because we have just a short amount of time here, and I want to be able to give time to that. Maybe there could be a way to help some of the drivers that have food insecurity who don't want to admit it. What do you think?
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How about we go to break, and then we can talk about that. And then, Nicole, you can give out information on how people can reach out to you, because you've got some terrific insight here in which you and your husband are doing. It's just fantastic. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson. We're talking with Nicole Folks Johnson. She and her husband, Dansha, own Eat Right Atlanta. It's a food co-op helping people with food insecurity. It's super important. Stay tuned right here on TNCRadio.live.
This blog on TNCRadio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. Common mistakes truck drivers continue to make. Getting into a car wreck is a risk everyone takes from driving a vehicle. Safety's not guaranteed while driving. Although you may be alert and driving safe, others may not. Wrecks of any kind are almost always traumatic. Wrecks that include heavy-duty trucks can be even more horrific because their injuries can be more severe and life-threatening. Truck drivers go through a long, extensive training process and must pass several exams to get their CDL. Even though truck driving school prepares truckers for life on the road, there are still mistakes truckers continue to make. Speeding. There may be some instances where you're running late to get a load delivered on time, so you speed to get there. Speeding is dangerous for all drivers. Going over the speed limit is not only illegal, it's risky and can lead to injuries or even death. Avoid speeding at any time. It's better to arrive late than risking your life and others. Rollover. Truck rollovers are due to a driver taking a turn too fast, inexperience, or load size. Rollovers tend to happen when drivers get too comfortable behind the wheel and forget to take extra precautions while driving. Remember to always pay attention and be aware of what you're hauling. Tailgating. Tailgating or following too close is something every driver should avoid. Driving too close behind a vehicle is extremely dangerous for heavy-duty truck drivers due to the weight and momentum of the truck. Keep your distance while driving. There should be at least 3 seconds between each vehicle on the road. Driving while tired. Sleep is very important for the overall well-being and safety of a truck driver. Due to the long hauls, truckers rarely get the recommended 8 hours of sleep every night. Truck drivers can drive up to 11 hours a day for 7 consecutive days. Drivers who fail to follow these guidelines put their lives and others at risk. Blind spots. Semi-trucks are notorious for their blind spots. Most blind spots are due to the inability to see when looking through a rear view or side mirror. Truckers must always be aware of their blind spots while driving. Failing to do so can result in serious injuries. Distracted driving. It's hard not to get distracted on the road when driving for 11 hours a day. Common distractions are eating while driving, looking at the GPS, texting and talking on the phone. Truck drivers should avoid texting and driving at all times. They should also consider investing in a headset to use when talking on the phone while driving. Weather conditions. When the weather changes, drivers need to adjust their speed and distance between other cars. Driving too fast and close in the rain or snow can result in a severe accident. There may be times when it's not safe to drive even after reducing the speed. Make sure to never drive when you feel uncertain of the weather conditions. This blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
As a professional driver, the engineers at Front Lane know that you remain focused on the road regardless of weather and traffic conditions. That's not always true of the drivers behind you. Every 9 minutes, another commercial vehicle is rear-ended by a driver failing to control their speed. And guess who gets the blame? When you have to brake quickly, Tailbone illuminates a series of bright red LED lights that allow the driver behind you to react up to 50% faster. Using amazing accelerometer technology and a battery that will last for years, Tailbone meets the standard set by the NHTSA and the FMCSA. Learn more by visiting www.frontlane.com/tailbone. That's www.frontlane.com/tailbone. Approved in all 50 states. It's Tailbone by Front Lane.
Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson here with Tom Kelly and Tom Kirk. We're talking with Nicole Folks Johnson. She and her husband, Dansha, own one wonderful co-op. It's called Eat Right Atlanta. I love what they're doing. They're helping people with food insecurity, which is more prevalent than people really realize. Tom, I thought I'd throw it to you, Mr. Kirk. What kind of food insecurity do drivers often face?
Well, there's a couple of things, and let's, for the sake of drivers, redefine food desert just a little bit. Number one, most truck stops are nowhere near grocery stores, so automatically we're in a food desert. But I think another thing that drivers face in a food desert is low nutritional value. So one of the things we saw since the pandemic, a lot of restaurants have shut down or have very limited hours. So depending on your schedule, you may be living on ramen, hot dogs, potato chips, and things of that nature. And that in its own way is a food desert. So I know during the pandemic, a lot of drivers, myself included, would be eating whatever it was. If we'd see a restaurant open that had a real food, whether we were hungry or not, we'd go in and eat. That was a little different type of food insecurity than we're talking about, because we never knew when we were going to get our next good meal, healthy meal, full meal. So sometimes we'd be eating, even if we weren't completely hungry, just because we didn't know when we would eat again. In terms of a good meal. So that's a different type of insecurity that drivers can face. But the other type that's probably as important is a lot of owner-operators, new drivers, if they're on tight budgets, they may be taking a loaf of bread and peanut butter and stretching it for weeks or weeks at a time. Same thing with ramen, because they have so little money. They're doing the peanut butter and jelly, the ramen, the instant noodles, etc., because it's what they can afford. It's fairly filling and it gives them some energy, but at the end of the day, it's not good for them. And these are problems that drivers know that are out there. And sometimes some of the chapels at the truck stops or certain other places will have little mini food pantries for drivers, where they may have a little bit of cans of soup or something like that a driver can take. But there really isn't a lot of resources, unfortunately, for drivers out there that are facing the different types of food insecurity.
Oh, what are your thoughts on that, Nicole?
It's true. And it's worrisome, because just like what I said before, you can pay the farmer today or you pay the doctor later, right?
Yeah.
So that eating like this over a long period of time is going to have negative effects on your body. It just will, and that's the thing that we're also trying to fix, because you get one body, you need to take care of it.
Yep.
And it's not people's fault that this is so. It's just it in a lot of places, it just is. So for us, we're trying to go to places where we know there's a need like this. So now you're telling me about truck stops, and now I got to go to set up farmers market at truck stop because they need fruits and vegetables.
You know, and definitely, and that's one of the things though is some truck stops may let you, and if they're corporate, they may not because of corporate policy. That's the other thing we have to face sometimes with some of that stuff. And the other issue too is, and I'm not saying drivers don't want fresh fruits and vegetables, but sometimes our storage options for certain things are limited because we may or may not have good refrigeration or a way to cook certain things. Some drivers do, some drivers don't. So that's another set of challenges that drivers have to overcome is, okay, great. I just got all these great fruits and vegetables. Now what do I do with them besides sit and look at them?
Well,
go ahead. Sorry.
No. And we take all of that into consideration. We always take the customer into consideration. So we know that they would need, being that they're drivers, so they probably just need, fruit that they can travel with and a few things that they can grab and things that are easy to manage while they're on the road, because you do need some nutrition. You do.
Oh, you do. And don't get me wrong. There's a lot of drivers, and I've done it myself in the past, who've cooked full gourmet meals in the truck. So it can be done. It's just not every driver is able or wants to necessarily go to that level for a variety of reasons. Right. But Shelley, I know we got to be getting close on time. One other thing I do, a question / way that maybe drivers can help their program is, let's say a driver's in the Atlanta area and he's got some food that he's been told to throw away or something that he feels he may be able to donate to you and your group. How can they get a hold of you, and are you maybe able to meet them someplace to take that off their truck?
We are. We're very mobile, and B, we have a warehouse in East Point, and we're always willing to meet a truck to get whatever we can give to share. We really are. And we can be reached at eatrightatlanta.com, and our main number is 404-822-8066.
So drivers, here's another option, particularly, and it sounds like if somebody calls you late at night or wherever, you have ways you can maybe answer the phone or get in touch with them, because sometimes, drivers, they find out 11 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock in the morning that they need to get rid of something in a short time frame. Mm-hmm. Hey, drivers, if you've got something, reach out to them. That is another option, just instead of throwing it in a trash can someplace.
Terrific idea.
Thank you.
Nicole, what is your website again and your phone number, just in case people didn't write that down?
eatrightatlanta.com. That's our website.
Mm-hmm.
And our phone number is 404-822-8066.
Excellent. We have about 3 minutes before we have to go to the top of the hour news. Is there a way, Nicole, for other areas to do what you have been doing? Because I see more food insecurity on the horizon with everything that's been happening with the economy. So what are your suggestions?
I mean, luckily, there are quite a few places that are doing something similar. It might not always be the same, but it's the same idea that, we're getting food and we're willing to share it. Mm-hmm. We're willing to share it for a reasonable price just because we want people to have access to good, fresh, and healthy food.
Mm-hmm.
And we would love it if more people would do that, and those who can't do that to donate so we can do more.
Amen to that. Now, when people are looking for themselves, do they just look up food co-op? Is that typically a good search word?
They can do that, or they can look for, fruit and vegetable delivery near me. They can just Google fruits and vegetables. And there are different options. But of course, yes, I will always encourage people to come to us.
Hey, Shelley, real quick, I just thought of something. Nicole, if a driver's maybe down in the Atlanta area and they'd like to get some fruits and vegetables, maybe can't get to the store and maybe have a limited budget, would you be opposed to them reaching out to you and saying, hey, if we can, swing by your warehouse sometime during the day, can we grab a pack of some kind?
We would love that. We would love that. We are at 1050 Oakley Drive, East Point, Georgia.
Okay.
You want me to say it again?
Yes, if you could, that'd be great.
1050 Oakley, OAKLEIGH Drive, East Point, Georgia.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Kirk, do you know exactly where that is in Atlanta?
Off the top, I have a rough idea, and actually that's maybe a good thing, is roughly where is East Point, let's say, relation to downtown Atlanta?
It's right below downtown Atlanta.
So it's kind of like that little south, I think, west quadrangle or whatever you want to call it there?
Yes, like near College Park. Like down,
okay.
Yes.
Oh, right near the old Kroger warehouse.
Yes, probably right over there. Yes.
Excellent. You know, I love what you're doing, Nicole. This is so very important. And you're keeping people healthy. And I love the fact that you and your husband kind of diverted and did a career change, and you're giving back. This is so terrific.
Thank you. Thank you. We love what we do.
Yes. And every little bit counts. That's how we're going to get ahead of food insecurity, because it shouldn't be happening anywhere. People shouldn't have to decide whether or not they eat or pay a power bill or something. It's just...
Amen to that.
It's so crazy. Thank you so much, Nicole, for being on the show. We have to go to the top of the hour news. You've been listening to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.live. We've been talking with Nicole Folks Johnson. She and her husband, Dansha, own Eat Right Atlanta. It's a food co-op helping people with food insecurity. Definitely check out their website. See how you can help. Thank you for listening to another great interview on TNCRadio.live and the Truckers Network radio show. All of the material you hear on TNCRadio.live, on our website, our broadcasts, or our podcasts are copyrighted. There can be no distribution without the express consent of TNCRadio.live and its partners. For inquiries, write us at info@tncradio.live. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast of the Truckers Network Radio Show. 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 Truckers Network Radio Show.